I think I perhaps say this about a lot of episodes I researched, but I am very excited today to bring you the story of the crimes committed by former Congressman James Traficant. This is a decades-long saga of corruption and ties to mobsters that has absolutely captured my attention from beginning to end.
I'm familiar with the name, but I actually don't know anything about this case.
Oh,
so I can't wait.
I am so excited to tell you all about it.
I always want to call him James Traficant, but...
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's James Traficant. She's Sarah.
She's Harley, and we're gaveling in another session of Crime in Congress. All right, so James Traficant was born to Agnes and James Anthony Traficant Sr. on May 8th, 1941 in Youngstown, Ohio. His father was a truck driver and his mother was a homemaker. Like many of the European immigrant families in the area, his family was working class and Catholic. James went by the nickname Jim, so that's what I'm going to use in this episode, by the way. Now, when Jim was growing up, the steel industry in the Mahoning Valley, and I think that's how you pronounce it, Mahoning.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, okay, we're going with it. Apologies to folks from
the Mahoning Valley.
Yeah. But this is also where Youngstown is located, by the way. But the steel industry there was booming at the time. In fact, by the 1920s, the Mahoning Valley was the second only to Pittsburgh in American steel production. Folks growing up in the area say that they could hear the clang of steel at night along with old steam whistles indicating shift changes, and that the sky was lit up at night from the furnaces.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like the air quality sucked.
That's what I would think, too. Now, Jim graduated from a Catholic high school, Cardinal Mooney High School, in 1959 before getting a degree in education from the University of Pittsburgh in 1963, where he played starting quarterback.
Ooh.
Now, I don't know a ton when it comes to football stats, but I'd like to throw in that...
you know more than me, so don't sell yourself too short there.
Okay, well, let me just say this. I'm going to say this stat, and I think... it's impressive, but I don't actually know why. It was just reported, and so for anyone who does know football and appreciates it, I'm going to throw it in. But in 1962, Jim led the Pitt Panthers to a 5-5 mark as he completed 39 passes for 611 yards and 3 scores. And really, I do throw this in for my fiance, Carrie Tomasetti, who sorry, I don't know
lives
why
at 632.
His social security number is. Sorry, I don't know why I didn't say his last name, but he listens to the podcast religiously because he knows that
he has to.
That he has to, and so Carrie, that one was for you.
Carrie, proof that you listened to this episode, code word is blue. Text Sarah.
Exactly.
But yeah, that seems like good stats.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
Good job. Go Jim.
But in 1963, Jim was also drafted in the 20th round by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL draft and also by the Raiders in the American Football League. But ultimately, he did not play professionally, but he was drafted. So there's
impressive.
that. Yeah. He went on to earn a master's degree in educational administration from the University of Pittsburgh in 1973 and a second master's degree in counseling from Youngstown State University in 1976. Between 1963 and 1971, it looks like Jim served as the consumer finance director at the Youngstown Community Action Program, where he instructed the courses on drug and alcohol abuse at Youngstown State University and Kent State University. He also did some national lecturing as well on drug and alcohol abuse and juvenile problems, and also did a training on the same topic at the Ohio Peace Officer Training Institute and the Ohio State Highway Patrol.
So he's a teacher with a little bit of law enforcement type knowledge.
Yeah. And I think this was kind of like, let's talk about drug and alcohol abuse and how we can treat it and how we can prevent it.
Basically DARE.
Yeah, basically DARE, but I think for like college age people to those in the Peace Corps, the Peace Officer and those serving in the Highway State Patrol. So this even reaches to adults.
I like this background for a member of Congress. The education, law enforcement adjacent, mental health adjacent. I like it.
Yeah. No, I like it too. Things will start to go downhill.
I feared.
So in 1971, Jim then became the executive director for the Mahoning County Drug Program, and he would stay there until 1981. During this decade, it's important to note that the steel industry in the Mahoning Valley went from boom to bust. On September 19, 1977, Youngstown Sheet and Tube announced it was closing its larger steel mill in the Mahoning Valley, putting some 5,000 people out of work. Locals call this day Black Monday, and things only got worse.
That's a lot of people.
Yep. According to Belt magazine, within 5 years of that mill's closure, a total of 50,000 jobs would disappear from the Mahoning Valley, devastating the community. In fact, before the steel industry collapse, Youngstown had a population well over 150,000, with above-average wages and one of the highest homeownership rates in the country. Today, the population of Youngstown is only about 60,000, and the median household income is less than $35,000. For reference, the real median household income in the U.S. at large in 2022 was $74,000. Over that.
That's insane. So it's about half.
Yep.
Wow.
Jim's background in this alcohol and drug trading, you'll see, becomes very important, right, in a community that's been devastated by loss. I mean, a lot of these people, right, they lose their jobs and they can't get another one and turn to drugs and alcohol, which...
That makes sense.
Yeah. All made Jim's job ever more important. But it's also important to note that along with the steel jobs disappearing, Youngstown was also becoming a hotspot for organized crime. So starting as early as the 1950s, the Pittsburgh and Cleveland mafia families began fighting for control of the valley. With the Pittsburgh Mafia, all right, this is where we're going to get some real mobster names coming in, okay? So get ready for this.
I would like an accent.
Oh, God. Okay, so with the Pittsburgh Mafia was Joey Naples and Lily Strollo's faction.
That was perfect.
Thanks. And on the Cleveland side were the Carrabba brothers of the Cleveland Mafia. So the Carrabba brothers were known as Charlie the Crab and Orly the Crab.
Very mob of them.
So mob. But this power struggle between the two mafia families resulted in violence, and a lot of it. So by 1963, Youngstown had been dubbed Crime Town USA by the Saturday Evening Post. The sub-headline of this story read, Youngstown had 75 bombings, 11 killings in a decade, and no one seems to care.
11 killings in a decade is kind of a lot for how much their population fell. But what really is more concerning to me is the 75 bombings.
Yes, absolutely. So again, in these, like, I guess, depending on different how mafias work, but these guys were all about bombings and like car bombs and stuff like that.
With 75 bombings, I actually feel like that killings number is a little low.
Yeah, right? But I think the bombings are how they killed.
Oh, so they're not being counted in like the...
Yeah, I guess like 11 is just like plain old fashioned murder,
Not fiery murders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gun to the head, knife to the throat, but not
stuff.
not boiling furnace in your car. Yeah.
Okay.
Describing Youngstown, the article also read, buffoons and incompetents succeed to important civic posts. Officials hobnob openly with criminals. Arrests of racketeering are rare, convictions rarer still, and tough sentences almost unheard of.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I would not want to live here.
Yeah, so this is Crime Town USA. 1,000%. And by the late 70s and early 80s, things had not improved. And this is the world in which Jim Traficant was elected to sheriff of Mahoning County in 1981. However, it wouldn't be too long before Jim got into some trouble.
I wish I was surprised, but with everything you just shared, feeling nervous.
Yep. In spring of 1981, while searching an apartment of a known Cleveland faction assassin, FBI agent Bob Kroner and his partner found a bread box which contained a tape. On the tape, Kroner listened to voices saying, quote unquote, and my mother also listens to this podcast. Mom, you're going to hear some words you don't like. I'm sorry, I have to say them. It's a real quote from a real mobster, okay?
You're just being a reporter.
I'm just being a reporter.
Well,
I'm just putting the facts out there.
I'll put soap in your mouth after.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mom, hear that. Okay, so the voices said, and I quote, he's a scared motherfucker. And you either play our fucking game or you're going to be put in a fucking box.
End scene. You said those words as if it was the first time you'd ever said them.
I have never said that in my life, ever.
Absolutely.
And I feel really disgusted at myself for even having to say that.
Yeah, let's just move on.
So FBI agent Kroner immediately recognized the two voices as the Caraba brothers, of course. However, there was a third voice. And after listening again, Kroner realized it was the voice of Jim Traficant.
It's crazy that these guys were well known enough to be able to recognize like the mobsters' voices.
Yeah.
I guess they're probably good at covering up their crimes, but it's also like, why are they still out there if everyone knows about them?
Totally. And I believe Jim's voice was recognized from TV too.
And like, yeah, what is Jim doing there?
Girl, you're gonna find out. Sometime later, Kroner found another tape in the safe deposit box of the Caraba's sister. Along with the tape was a handwritten note that said, quote unquote, "If I die, these tapes go to the FBI in Washington. I feel I have more people after me because of these tapes, and I pray and ask God to guide and protect my family."
Okay, love her because too many people die with these secrets. And so at least she was like, once I'm gone, the people deserve to know.
Yeah. Boom. So according to a great piece by David Grand for the New Republic, the tape recorded the conversation of several arguing over which public officials had been bought off by the Pittsburgh mob. Kroner recognized the voices of the Caraba brothers and Jim once again. Jim was even heard saying, "I don't know all of them," talking about who was paid off, "but I know it's a fucking fistful." The tapes revealed that Jim was being bought off by the Caraba brothers, and in the tape, Jim says, quote unquote, "My loyalty is here. And now we've got to set up the business that they've run for all these fucking years and swing that business over to you. And that's what my concern is. That's why you finance me, and I understand that."
Ooh, okay. Someone needs to get their mouth washed out with soap, Mr. Carabia brother.
So that was Jim Traficant.
Jim.
Yeah, that was Jim Traficant saying
A member of Congress. You ran for Congress with that mouth.
that.
Insane.
Unbelievable. But yeah, essentially saying that you guys have bought me off, you financed me, you gave me money, and that's why I'm going to use my position of power now to make sure that the money now goes towards you and not the Pittsburgh mob.
This might be one of the most corrupt members we've covered so far.
Seriously, it's a wild ride.
That's insane.
So it appears that the tapes were made during Jim's sheriff campaign in 1980.
So his campaign for sheriff was likely financed by the mob.
Yes.
Was definitely financed by the mob.
I think it's safe to say that, yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So according to the tapes, which I also got from that New Republic piece, Traficant acknowledged receiving more than $100,000 from the Cleveland faction for his campaign. So, yes, he definitely received that.
Yeah.
In exchange, he'd use the sheriff's office to protect the Caraba brothers while shutting down their rivals.
I wonder if he feared the rivals at all. Because if they caught on to what was going on, they would probably come after Jim. Oh, okay.
Just you wait.
Okay.
Just wait a couple paragraphs.
Cool.
But quoting from that same article, quote unquote, "Your Uncle Tony was my Goomba," said Charlie, one of the brothers. "And I feel that you're a brother to us. I just don't want you to make any fucking mistakes." Traficant assured his benefactors that he was solid and that if any of his deputies betrayed him, quote unquote, "they'll fucking come up swimming in the Mahoning River." So I'm just putting on my Tony Soprano for you.
I love it. Keep it going.
And you guys can't see it, but I am talking with my hands when I do this too, just to make sure that
there's a full visual. She also has the wife beater on. She's got a beer in her hand. She's smoking.
Yeah, I'm chain smoking in the pod today. Just for you, the listener at home.
Thank you for the visual. She hasn't shaved her legs in weeks. She really got into character for this. Why did you have a lighter right there?
A candle here.
Sure. Okay.
I told you I'm chain smoking in the pod today. Okay. Anyways. So back to what you had asked before. Turns out Jim had already taken some money from the Pittsburgh mob in the form of about $60,000. The message that came in the first installment read, "I want you to be my friend."
I would be anyone's friend for $60,000.
And this is why Harley is not a member of Congress.
You're like, heck yeah, where do you want to go?
Yeah. Oh my god, you want to be my friend and you gave me $60,000?
Besties?
Besties?
Sleepover?
Yeah.
My place? Tonight?
What do you want? What do you want to do? Anyways, so the Croppas brothers knew actually about the money that Jim had received from the Pittsburgh mob, but Jim had to earn their trust and gave them some of the Pittsburgh mob money to do that. Worried about his own safety, Jim says on those tapes, "Look, I don't want to fucking die in 6 months, Charlie."
No one does.
No one does. Appearing to hatch an escape plan if he ever got caught, Jim is also heard saying on the tapes that if his shady dealings with the brothers were exposed, that he would say, and another quote, "I was so fucking pissed off at this crooked government, I came to you and asked you guys if you would assist me and to help to break it up. And you said, fuck it, we'll do it, okay? That's what it's going to be and what you're going to say in court." Hearing these tapes, Kroner brought Jim down to the office, and according to a sworn court testimony from Kroner and other agents present, Jim denied knowing the Croppa brothers or taking money from them. When Kroner popped in the tape, Jim allegedly said, "I don't want to hear anymore. I've heard enough." Jim then signed a confession that read, "During the period of time that I campaigned for sheriff of Mahoning County, Ohio, I accepted money with the understanding that certain illegal activities would be allowed to take place in the Mahoning County after my election, and that, as sheriff, I would not interfere with those activities." So he signed this confession.
And he goes on to be a member of Congress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was not expecting his crimes to start this early.
Yeah, but... oh, just you wait.
I'm excited.
Weeks later, though, Jim recanted, presumably after learning that he would have to likely resign as sheriff and go public.
Did he not see that coming?
Apparently not. During this time, Jim said on a local television station, "All those people trying to put me in jail should go fuck themselves."
On TV?
On TV.
Oh my goodness.
This guy is a character.
He needs a comms director. And a moral compass.
Do you think a comms director would really help him, though?
Yeah, I do.
I don't. Like, you can... when he gets up there with the mic, you think he's not going to say something like that?
A lot of media training would be needed. You know, you would have to be in, like, the spin room being like, see, he's so passionate that he can't help but curse at you.
You'll see that he really does take to heart this kind of... I mean, it's a whole persona of the Mahoning Valley, right? Mm-hmm. How it kind of went from boom to bust, and he's just a blue-collar, guy doing his best. He's a man of the people. You'll kind of see this theme come back where it's almost a badge of pride to have that kind of unpolished, no bullshit type persona, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I see that when things are going well for you. But when things are not going well for you, I think decorum is very important. Yeah. And he does not appear to have any.
Yeah. But in response to him saying, "All those people trying to put me in jail should go fuck themselves," end quote, Jim was arrested by the FBI for allegedly taking $163,000 in bribes from the mob and willfully and knowingly combining, conspiracy, confederating, and agreeing. Jim was facing 23 years in jail and RICO charges.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. By the way, this is when he's a sheriff.
This is insane. I've also never heard the term confederating be used like that.
Same.
Yeah. Learning new things every day. Thanks, Jim Traficant.
Yeah, I like it. So despite these very serious charges, Jim opted to represent himself in court.
Oh my gosh, they always do.
Let me emphasize. Faced with RICO charges, Jim Traficant decided to represent himself in court.
That's insane.
Yeah.
He had the money to hire a lawyer, we know.
Yeah.
What's going on, Jim?
So, on August 9th, 1982, Jim, unsurprisingly, pled innocent.
Shocking.
Yeah. However, in the lead up to Jim's trial in February 1983, he actually became somewhat of a hometown hero for refusing to sign foreclosure deeds that would have evicted unemployed steelworkers and their families.
Okay.
As sheriff. Mm-hmm.
Good for him.
So Jim was actually found in contempt for this and was sentenced to 100 days in jail. Now, he did end up signing the deeds on his third day into the sentence, which got him released, but he did make additional efforts after this to stop the foreclosures on these homes. This garnered him, again, a lot of support for residents who saw him as fighting for the little guys.
I keep forgetting this guy's in like a sheriff and in power.
Yeah.
Insane.
But I mean, this made national headlines. I mean, especially all the people in Youngstown were like, this is our guy.
Yeah. And this is admirable. He was willing to go to jail for 3 days.
Yeah.
For something he believed in.
Yeah.
You had 72 hours of honor, Jim. Congrats.
Yeah, you got it. So at last, on April 23rd, 1983, Jim's trial began. As Jim had planned out on the aforementioned tape, Jim's defense was that he was running a sting operation, and had not the FBI interfered, he would have been able to destroy and disrupt the political influence and the mob control over the Mahoning County. In fact, Jim said that he had planned to use the Cleveland mob brothers to take down the Pittsburgh mob and then, of course, take down the Cleveland mob, which was weaker. To quote from Jim's statements in court, "The point of the matter I want to make is this. I got inside of the mob. Then I fucked the mob."
I don't think anyone wants their sheriff inside the mob. That seems like something you would let someone else do.
Yeah, maybe an undercover agent.
Yeah. But I think the mob fucked you, dude. I'm sorry.
It seems like, yeah. But during the trial, Jim admitted that he took the money to overlook gambling, loan sharking, drug trafficking, and prostitution by the mob, and that, yes, it was his voice on the tape, and that, yes, he had signed a statement, but it wasn't a so-called confession that the FBI had. He also said that he didn't tell the FBI agents about his sting because he just couldn't trust them.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm. And despite Jim's admission of guilt, pretty much, it only took the jury 4 days to come back from deliberation and acquit him.
He was acquitted?
He was acquitted.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
Yeah.
Because there's so much. He's on tape.
He's on tape.
So they must have believed his whole sting operation argument.
Or
just didn't care.
He's fighting for the little guy. I mean, this is still, it wasn't like, yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm. But I also read another article from a juror of that trial, and the juror said this: "We couldn't put that man or any man in prison for 23 years with a $30,000 fine based upon what was presented to us during that trial."
I wonder if the sentence would have been lighter, if it would have been like 3 years.
If they would have
found him guilty.
I wonder.
Interesting.
Yeah. But all this to say, Jim had won over the people of Mahoning County, and he was an icon, and he was a fighter. So at this point, Jim has the juice. And on November 6, 1984, he was successful in unseating Republican Lyle Williams by over 17,000 votes to win election to the House of Representatives in Northeast Ohio's 17th District.
So he walked straight out of jail and into the House of Representatives.
Pretty much, yep.
Wow, I guess straight out of court and into the House of Representatives.
Yeah. Now, before I talk about Jim's time in Congress, I'd like to also note that in 1987, the U.S. tax court ruled that Jim owed $108,000 in taxes on the $163,000 that he had accepted from mobsters in 1980. The IRS ended up garnishing Jim's paychecks which essentially means that the IRS can seize a portion of your paycheck until the debt is paid. Crazy enough, the money that Jim had allegedly taken from the mobsters in this quote-unquote sting operation was never turned over to authorities and instead kept by Jim.
What? It's like he really took a bribe.
Yeah, because he did. So Jim gained notoriety for his floor speeches filled with crude language and often ended with the phrase, "beam me up," as an homage to Star Trek.
Oh my gosh.
His style also turned heads, often wearing cowboy hats, bell-bottom pants, polyester suits, narrow ties, and of course, a distinctive toupee.
Ooh, sexy.
So here is an example of some of his wild oratory published by the American Conservative. Unbelievable. What's next? Rectile diaries? Men are dropping like flies in America from prostate cancer, and Broadway is promoting vaginal titillation. Beam me up. I advise all New York men to sleep on their stomachs, and I yield back all the STDs on the East Coast.
What is he talking about? Like avoiding cancer?
I don't have the context behind that, but I believe so.
So if you, I also love yielding back all the STDs to the East Coast. Like you can have them. That's promote. Okay, so I'm gonna try to like untangle this for a sec. He's saying that the reason men are dropping like flies from prostate cancer is because Broadway is spending too much time on female pleasure and we need to give all the STDs back to the East Coast, and also to avoid prostate cancer, sleep on your stomach.
Sounds like a good guess.
Sounds like he was on WebMD before this.
All right, I have another one for you. Mr. Speaker, Medicare trust funds lost another $4 billion. Payroll contributions keep going down. Maybe it's the types of jobs that are being created. Check this out. How about a handkerchief folder, a drawstring knotter, a hooker inspector, a pantyhose crotch closer machine operator supervisor, a muff winder, a fur blower, a whizzer operator, a brassiere cup molder fitter? Evidently, Mr. Speaker, when American workers become muff-winding brassiere fitters and fur-blowing whizzer operators, the Medicare Trust Fund will continue to lose money.
This man does not like female body parts. Just not at all.
All right, I have one more for you. This president has gone from Disney to Spielberg, Looney Tunes to outer space, and he's not finished yet. I predict that his next production will be a Stephen King thriller.
Okay, first of all, if the president went on to produce a thriller, I would love that. Also, he's clearly not educated on Looney Tunes because Looney Tunes do go to space.
First of all, yeah.
What's the movie with Michael Jordan? Space Jam.
Yeah, Space Jam.
So, watching Space Jam, he would know that Looney Tunes and outer space are one and the same.
So he's just incorrect and inaccurate.
Uneducated.
Yeah. All this to show wild floor speeches.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to come up with any reason why he would ever need to say any of this. The Medicare one, sure. I see a little bit of a federal nexus there, but...
the first one, the Rectile Diaries and Yield Back All the STDs on the East Coast. That one, I'm not totally sure where that one came into.
And, like, is a rectal diary just, like, logging your poop?
I think so, which actually is very... People do that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't, but
I don't either. But I think people who need to would.
Like, maybe if you're like at risk of prostate cancer, maybe just like a little
need to know.
A little PD, a little poop diary.
Yeah. Also, I've heard of people doing, like, this is gross, but like consistency, shape, size. Yeah, like really recording all of it for the sake of health.
Side note, and I hate that we're about to be we're going to be filming a newsflash soon, and newsflash, this same topic comes up, so get ready, folks.
Oh boy.
But there are these new cameras that you can put in your toilet, and they like use AI to like tell you things about yourself based off of what's coming out of your body. I don't like it. I very much dislike it, actually. I do not like cameras in my toilet.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of that.
Can you imagine if that got hacked?
Yeah. I think no.
I think that's where I become whatever our generation's equivalent of a boomer is. When it comes to, like, cameras and toilets.
Oh, heck no.
Nope, get the government out of there.
You don't need to see that. So you go to the doctor for.
Exactly. All right. Anyway, so Jim Traficant.
Jim Traficant. So in 1988, Jim entered the race for president, participating in the Democratic primaries held in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. His efforts resulted in, at best, a modest victory, earning him one delegate.
That's a bit of an accomplishment considering that he's was not a major candidate.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Like, solid.
Go off.
But flash forward to September 1993, Traficant played a significant role in the return of a Cleveland area auto worker named John Demaniuk from Israel. So this auto worker had recently been acquitted of allegations that he was a former Nazi gas chamber operator known as Ivan the Terrible.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And Jim had actively lobbied for him throughout all the legal proceedings. That's just a fun tidbit. One of the things he's known for. I didn't get much more into it beyond that. Most importantly, though, Jim was outspoken in his opposition to free trade and the IRS.
I like half of that.
So in 1995, Republicans took over the House, and from there, Jim started voting with Republicans a lot. While he did vote against all 4 articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton, he sided with the Republican Party on issues like abortion, which I think makes sense with his Catholic upbringing.
And at that time, it was much more common for Democrats to be pro-life.
Yeah, totally.
Like, Biden was pro-life for a while.
But he was definitely flipping a lot more than especially Democrats would have liked.
And this was like peak Hyde Amendment time, too, where like that was like, you can't touch the Hyde Amendment. So that makes sense. It's not too crazy.
So meanwhile, though, in Mahoney County, federal authorities were making real progress on dismantling mafia forces that ruled over the valley. By Christmas of 1997, the leader of the Pittsburgh mob, Strollo, was arrested along with dozens of his underlings. This came on the heels of a botched hit ordered by Strollo to kill the Mahoning County prosecutor Paul Gaines, which, by the way, I think I have to do at least a mini episode on in the future because it is fascinating.
Okay, wait, please do.
But in case you were wondering if Jim still had connections to the mob, his top district aide, Charles Onesti, pled guilty to racketeering charges in March of 1998.
Cool.
Turns out, Onesti served as a bagman to Strollo, which essentially means that Onesti was the middleman who took the money from Strollo and then distributed it to the Youngstown public servants.
So he was like Uber Eats for the mafia's money.
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
Interestingly enough, the FBI said that Onesti conspired with Strollo to put money into the campaign of the Mahoning County Sheriff in 1996. So not Jim's race, but another sheriff race that the mob is trying to buy.
I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending.
Okay, sorry, we won't sing anymore.
I might.
No promises. Notably, Onesti joined Traficant's office in 1985 when Jim first entered office. Remember those old tapes? Apparently, on those old tapes, Jim can be heard calling out Onesti for being in cahoots with the mob.
That's exactly the type of person I'd want on staff.
Yep, totally. From what I can tell, all these convictions were kind of part of this giant corruption probe in Mahoning County led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Craig Morford. While they had nailed a ton of public officials and aides like Onesti who were close to Jim Traficant, so far they had not been fully able to link Jim in court at least. But now I'm going to bring you to January 2000. Jim was running for his 9th term in the House, despite continued federal investigations into his alleged corruption. In the Democratic primary, Jim had 2 challengers, then State Senator Robert Hagan and Mahoning County Auditor George DeBlack. In late January on the campaign trail, Jim acknowledged the federal investigations and that he had turned over his personal and financial records dating back to 1995 after being served a subpoena. In true Jim fashion, though, he laid blame to everyone else besides himself, saying that the timing right before the primary was very convenient, if you know what I mean, and that it was all because of all those things he said about the IRS.
Right, because he's the only person talking badly about the IRS.
Only person. Jim also said, "The reason why they have not been able to tie me to illegal activity is simple. I have done nothing wrong. End of story."
I feel like since we still have a lot more story left, he's not right about that.
Yeah, it seems like you maybe... And also, you definitely did take a bribe back then,
Yeah.
so you... Anyways, moving on.
Actually...
And since Jim had been siding with Republicans and even said he might switch allegiances completely, even some Republican members of Congress kind of stuck their neck out to defend him during this time. For example, Representative Steve LaTourette said that Jim was, quote-unquote, one of the best members of the House of Representatives, and if, as I suspect, this is some fishing expedition to embarrass him a month before the primary, I will be happy to lead the charge to make sure everyone responsible in the attorney's office loses their jobs.
Dang.
Mm-hmm. And despite the ongoing investigation and Jim's own prediction that he would be indicted, Jim Traficant won his primary with 50% of the vote.
That means voters still like him.
Yep. And I think for multiple reasons, too. One, Jim was a great politician and was really great at listening to blue-collar workers in his district. Second, the culture of Youngstown was so tied to mob activity that many saw this as less of an issue overall. And I say this based on the newspapers I read again in that great article by David Graham. In that article, he recalled a conversation with Youngstown State University's Mark Schutz, who contended that, and I'm just going to read this excerpt because it's so well written, but he argued that after so many years of eroded civic institutions, the community has come to rely increasingly on mobsters, who play the same role in civic life that the police and political establishment do in other cities. We have socialized ourselves and our offspring that this is the way the world is. This is our little safe part with our community and church, but in order for it to be safe, you need these people to be our brokers.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah. Fresh off his primary win in March of 2000, Jim did a 45-minute long interview on C-SPAN where he addressed the investigation. And I'd like to play this audio for you and our listeners because it is quite entertaining.
Democrat from Ohio, looking for a 9th term, correct? Youngstown,
Yes,
Ohio?
I am.
You said before the primary that you may expect to be indicted. What's going on?
I told that to the voters to be honest about it. I've been targeted for 20 years. I'm the only American in the history of the United States, and this is not complimenting myself, and I'm not talking macho. I'm afraid to death of the FBI and the Justice Department, like every American is. But right before the election, hawks are circling, buzzards circling, sharks circling, releasing news articles trying to kill the Traficant election. Let me tell you what. 20 years ago, not quite, I was the only American in the history of the United States to defeat the Justice Department in a RICO case pro se. That means representing myself without being an attorney and going through a full-term trial. They had a false confession. And that false confession was corroborated by forensic science, or you and I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be watching this show from Leavenworth. They have targeted me ever since, and here's what I'm saying. Scared to death, not acting macho. I'm targeting them. They better not make a damn mistake, because I think the American people are fed up with being targeted, and if there's anything I've done, it's something that anybody else in Congress has done, and they're trying to make mountains out of molehills, and I won't stand for it. Now, if I die in that courtroom, Paul, if I die in that courtroom fighting them, get ready for me. And if we lose everything, my family, everything we've got, and I see the pain in the eyes of my wife, my daughters, no, if I lose everything, I lose it all, but get ready for me. I am mad, and I'm going to fight them.
We have a national audience here. They may not be specifically familiar. What are you going to be alleged to have done if it comes down?
I don't know. They're trying to say that I did favors for people. They did favors for me. I did a lot of favors and help for everybody in my district. Look, when I took office, we had a 22% unemployment. Right now, my district is 5% unemployment, but much of that is in the black and minority community. And I had enough. I want an empowerment zone from the President of the United States, and I expect it this year. And I want additional appropriations to help my people, especially those on the bottom end of the ladder. I expect to meet with Andrew Cuomo, and if they want to keep me a Democrat, Mr. Gephardt should get on the phone with Mr. Cuomo right now. I'm here representing my district. Whether I'm here next year, that's the people's decision. But while I'm here, I'm going to make it happen. But on this business, I was honest with my people before the election. I wanted to let them know that, yes, they want to indict me. And here's what I'm saying now, and I'm saying this to the Justice Department in Cleveland, Ohio. Number one, if you are to indict me in June so I could be tried over the August recess. I don't want to miss any votes.
All right. So that was the clip I wanted to play you.
Okay. Thoughts. I will say, I have a lot of experience with that show, the C-SPAN Washington Journal, and it gets crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild. There was during, I think, it was when Romney and Obama were running against each other. There was someone who would call in every day and just ask about Romney's penis size, like on live TV. So it's the Wild Wild West. And so in the context of that show, he sounds a little bit less crazy. Mm-hmm. But, okay. We covered a lot of ground. He's definitely a talented politician. The way that he was able to weave in his priorities and kind of gaslight you into thinking that he's defending you when really he's just trying to defend himself. Also iconic that he's, like, telling them when to indict him. Yeah. Like, do it. I want to be on trial over the August recess. That sounds like someone who's expecting to go to trial. And I don't think innocent people expect to be taken to trial. Now, let's just play, I hate the phrase, but devil's advocate for a sec. If he really was set up the first time with the whole mob stuff, which he wasn't, but if he was, I can see why he would be a little bit more weary this time. But I do find it interesting that he's more afraid of the FBI than he is of the mob. And I think that tells you a little bit about who his friends are. Right. And he's crazy, but I'm a little impressed. I'm not going to lie.
I told you he's a really good politician. Yeah. And you can kind of see, how voters in his district would kind of love him. Like, I think I can see it.
Because what he's doing is he's confusing you enough to not be able to make a decision, and that is how he breaks through. He can't convince you that he's innocent. he also is hoping that the FBI can't convince you he did anything. So his best bet is just to confuse you and to come up with all of these like platitudes about I'm fighting for the people. I believe this. I believe that. I hate the IRS. The IRS is after me. People are like, yeah, the IRS took an extra $1,000 from me last year too. Like, I get it, dude.
Right.
And they're just confused enough to want to give this man of the people guy kind of a benefit of the doubt. So even though if I were to just like read what he said on paper, I'd be like, this guy's a lunatic. And I do think he's a bit crazy. But in the context of trying to woo voters, I think he's knocking it out of the park, unfortunately. I wish it were more sophisticated than that. I wish you had to be more sophisticated than that, but you don't.
Well, I think you're right on the money there, because November 7th, 2000, Jim won his 9th term with 50% of the vote in a 3-way race.
I think one of the things we've learned is that male politicians who appeal to the man of the people demographic, the people who want to see like that type of like blue collar voter, does not care if you have RICO charges. They do not care if you have an indictment against you. And in fact, I think it makes them like you more.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. One of us. Yeah.
Like if George Santos were in a different district, he could be reelected.
Yeah, I think you're
he's
right.
just in the wrong district, and he's not man of the people. He's very elitist. But like, take his crimes, take his whole thing, and put it into the guy at the auto shop, and you have a successful 9-term politician.
Yeah, right.
Crazy.
All politics is local, right? So as Jim kind of hinted in that C-SPAN interview, he did something kind of radical by voting for Republican Dennis Hassert for Speaker of the House in 2001.
He's just a loose cannon.
He is going to do whatever he wants. In doing so, he was essentially excommunicated from the Democrat Party, being stripped of his seniority and being given 0 committee assignments. Or, of course, the Republicans were not keen on giving him committee assignments either, so Jim became the first member of the House in over a century to lack a single committee assignment outside of leadership.
Are you ready for a hot take?
Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk, especially in the 117th Congress, about like stripping people of their committee assignments and whatnot. I think that no matter how crazy a member is, you need to give them committee assignments. And I would even go so far as to say you need to give them more committee assignments because they get bored. And when they're bored,
you have to keep them busy.
They talk.
Yep.
So put them on every science, space, and technology subcommittee. Put them on things where they aren't going to be able to make too much damage. But you do not want a loose cannon in D.C. with nothing to do and access to a microphone.
Going to all the talk shows. Yeah.
Exactly.
1,000%. And also, I mean, I was just about to say, reporters at this time would say, yeah, he would go sit on the House floor and, you know, do crazy speeches, and even with like members shunning him, like he was talking. Yeah. He was using that mic.
Yeah. I also don't like it because even though the individual doesn't deserve a seat on a committee, the people they represent do. Like, we just saw all of this with like Santos and McCarthy. And it's like, yes, does Jim Traficant deserve a committee assignment? No. But do his people deserve a voice on a committee? Yes. And that's kind of like the dichotomy of, do we punish the individual, or do we recognize that he's just part of a whole?
Yeah.
And I think you can come down different ways on that, but it's an interesting debate.
No, I think that's a great take. I like it. So would it be too long before, on May 4th, 2001, a federal grand jury indicted Jim on a 10-count indictment, which included racketeering, bribery, accepting illegal gratitudes, obstruction of justice, defrauding the government, and tax evasion?
Here we go. The IRS is after him.
Yep. So let's go over what was included in this 10-count indictment. And by the way, I put this together looking at reporting from the Associated Press and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Just putting it out there. Want to give credit where credit is due. Count 1. Conspiracy to violate a federal bribery statute. This count alleges that Jim interceded on behalf of Anthony and Robert Boosie, who owned an asphalt paving company, when the two ran into legal trouble. In exchange, Jim received free labor and materials from the Boosie brothers on a farm owned by Jim's daughter.
Okay, of all the things we've heard, this one's like lowest rung, but shady.
Yeah. And I think these ones are definitely not perhaps We'll go over it. I'll let you say your judgments at the end.
Okay.
But for example, the Boosie brothers were barred from getting state and federal contracts because of their connection to the mob. Before they were officially barred, though, Jim tried to pressure the Federal Highway Administration not to bar the brothers, falsely claiming that it would result in the loss of 150 jobs and that Jim would conduct a congressional investigation.
He's not on a committee, though. So I don't think he can do an investigation.
However, yes, but he might have been at the time.
True.
Because it was 2001 where he got kicked off of everything. But he had been in Congress on committee assignments before that. So I don't think this was from 2001 because that wouldn't have made sense in the timeline of the trial.
Yeah, anyway, makes sense.
But to show you further how shady the Boosie brothers were, Robert Boosie ended up fleeing the country after transferring millions of dollars into an account to the Cayman Islands.
I don't think anyone who doesn't live in the Cayman Islands has an account there for good reasons.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But the potential penalty for this crime, this count, was 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine.
Ooh, and we're only on count 1.
Yep. Count 2. Conspiracy to violate the federal bribery statute. This count has to do with some more free labor and materials Jim received on a farm in Honey Creek from Honey Creek Contracting Company and its owner, Arthur Sugar, in exchange for several favors. For example, Jim lobbied to get Arthur's son a reduced sentence for a DUI charge and transferred to a halfway house in Youngstown. Even though Jim did end up paying Sugar some money to disguise the bribery, the number definitely did not add up with all the work Sugar's company had done on the farm. And Jim also continued to lobby on his behalf for contracts. Funny enough, in 2000, Sugar was convicted of perjury, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice.
It's like people in his orbit keep getting, convicted for things. Mm-hmm. It's circling.
So the potential penalty for this count against Jim was 5 years in prison and, again, another $250,000 fine.
So unless they serve it, what's the word for it?
Concurrently.
Yeah, unless he serves concurrently, we're looking at 10 years and $500,000, and we're still going. Yeah,
and we're now hitting count 3. All right, count 3. Conspiracy to violate the federal bribery statute. Again, this count alleged that Jim lobbied the Federal Aviation Administration to certify laser-guided aircraft landing technology for John Cafaro, a Youngstown developer affiliated with the U.S. Aerospace Group. In exchange, Jim received $26,000 in boat repairs on his boat, and Cafaro paid Jim Traficant $13,000 to buy the boat. Like before, the potential penalty for this count is 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Count 4. Conspiracy to violate the federal bribery statute. Now this one's a little wild. This count alleged that Jim agreed to hire attorney Alan Sinclair for his congressional staff in exchange for a monthly kickback or portion of Sinclair's monthly paycheck.
No way.
Yeah. As the indictment tells us, Sinclair went to meet with Jim's administrative assistant, who also admitted that he was giving part of his paycheck to Jim Traficant. He was part of the kickback scheme. The procedure was to cash the paycheck and then place the money due to Jim in an envelope and slide that envelope under the door of Jim's office in Boardman, Ohio.
Why would Sinclair agree to this? There are so many jobs on the Hill.
Right? I don't know.
Why this job? Why this congressman? Why were you... You're not paid that well. Why are you willing to give up even 1% of your salary? He had to have some dirt on him.
It's got to be something like that. Sinclair accepted the job and then paid Jim over $32,000.
Okay, I wonder if maybe Traficant wanted more money. So he was like, hey, Sinclair, I'm going to give you a higher salary, but that extra is coming back to me. So like maybe Sinclair was able to keep his salary, but like...
Well, this is a whole new job.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like maybe part of this agreement was that Sinclair had a higher salary to kind of offset the money that he was giving to Jim. That way he could just funnel taxpayer dollars to Jim.
He wasn't mad about the amount that he was getting in general because it was already...
That's probably what happened. Because a congressional staffer, especially at this time, cannot afford $2,500 a month.
Right.
So he had to have had a crazy high salary.
Yeah. No matter what, Jim Traficant's getting paid over there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to count 5. Seeking and accepting illegal gratuities. This one has to do with Jim taking the kickbacks from attorney Sinclair. Also, sorry, I forgot to mention, Sinclair's an attorney. So, what is happening?
It sounds like he's like, there are attorneys on the Hill, but they're on committee.
Yeah.
So I've never heard of an attorney working in a personal office.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's happened. I mean, clearly it has, but what? Sinclair, go get your bag somewhere else.
Yeah, like, what is happening? But again, potential penalty for this crime would be 5 years in prison and another $250,000 fine. Count 6, obstruction of justice. Allegedly, Jim tried to persuade attorney Sinclair to destroy evidence and provide false testimony to the federal grand jury. This charge would carry up to 2 years in prison and another $250,000 fine.
He's about to be broke.
I know. Count 7, conspiracy to defraud the United States. This one alleged that Jim defrauded the United States by taking kickbacks from his congressional employees and requiring employees from his Youngstown and DC offices to do free repairs on his farm and boat.
Yeah, no. You're not even really allowed to pick up dry cleaning. Like, this is,
Yeah.
And also,
can you imagine being put to work on Jim Traficant's farm? Like, what?
That's insane. Oh, man. I mean, yeah, that's rough. I would quit.
Right? I mean, the fact that I guess some of these people did, but still, it's crazy.
Or if you live in Youngstown, he's your congressman.
Yeah.
Like, you would have to, if you wanted to stay in that field, you'd have to move.
Yeah.
I feel worse for the district staff here than I do for the DC staff.
1,000%, yeah. But, by the way, for this charge, it would be, potential penalty would be for this one, 2 years in prison and, again, another $250,000 fine. I mean, these are really racking up.
They really are.
All right. The next counts are 8 and 9. I'm going to do these ones together because these counts are for filing false tax returns in 1998 and 1999. For both of those years, the indictment alleged that Jim and his wife reported income that was significantly less than the dough that Jim was actually bringing in. Pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Potential penalty for each count was 3 years in prison and a $100,000 fine.
Hey, at least it's not 250,000.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of saying that word or that number. And finally, we've made it, guys, to count 10, racketeering. This bad boy charge alleged a pattern of racketeering activity, which included bribery, mail fraud offenses related to the charges that I've already mentioned. This charge carries the heaviest sentence, and if convicted, Jim could serve 20 years in prison and have to pay, once again, another $250,000 fine. In addition, though, the government could seek a court order that required Jim to forfeit any property shown to be derived through racketeering. The grand jury who indicted Jim also filed forfeiture petition that claimed Jim had interest in properties worth at least $100,000 that were derived through racketeering. Harley, how do you feel about all these charges?
Whew. Not great. They clearly did their homework.
Yeah.
Because this is a lot. It's not like that these are 10 charges from one crime. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of little crimes in here. But what I'm concerned about, and I'm really curious to see how this plays out, is for messaging, there's not one big thing that he did. There's lots of, I mean, I say little in major air quotes, but like little things that he did. And so I wonder if it's going to make voters just kind of confuse voters.
Well, it's interesting too because so he learned obviously from his first go around in which they gave him hard cash for his campaign to overlook crimes, right? But for this one, there's a lot more of you do work on my farm, free labor, free repairs that kind of makes it a lot more difficult to see that clear money trail and that clear racketeering, that clear bribery, yada, 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 right?
He's running his office like a mob boss.
He totally is.
Taking money from his staff, requiring labor. This is like mob boss meets indentured servitude.
Yeah.
Insane. I can't get past the whole taking money from staff thing. That's crazy.
That was the craziest one for me.
Yeah.
But again, like, do the voters care as much about that?
No, because DC elites, everyone in DC has money, and he probably agreed to it, and oh, man,
I know,
crazy.
Doesn't take too long, though, for Jim to come up with his counter-argument, which is widespread corruption in the FBI office who led the investigation.
Well, I was about to say, it sounds like the FBI just wanted to waste a whole lot of time and personnel to go after this random congressman from Ohio.
This
Right?
poor
Right.
congressman from Ohio.
There's only 435 congressmen, and he was picked out of all of them just because he said some unsavory things about the IRS.
It's a witch hunt.
Yeah. Witch hunt. Free Jim Traficant.
Word of the year, word of the decade is witch hunt.
Witch hunt. Free Jim Traficant.
So, like his trial in the 1980s, Jim was determined to represent himself, which the judge did allow him to do so, but refused to make any scheduling amendments to work with Jim's vote schedule. So he did not get the August recess, quick and easy trial, right?
Yeah, they're like, we're doing this on our time, not yours.
Exactly. We are the law.
Yeah.
Now, I think that most normal people in this situation would be less inclined to run for office.
But we are not talking about a normal person, are we?
Not our boy Jim. So in December of 2001, facing racketeering charges, he announced that he would run for re-election, saying that he would not be intimidated.
If I were hearing this story 5 years ago, I would be like, whoa. But now I'm like, yeah, that's what you do. You get indicted, and then you run anyway.
Yeah.
And you just say it's weaponization.
Yep.
And it works.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're seeing this a lot now.
Formula.
He was the OG. He was the OG. Everyone took notes from Jim Traficant.
The OG mob boss of Congress.
Boom. Jim, your legacy lives on. However, there would be a slight problem with Jim trying to run for re-election because the Republican-controlled Ohio State Legislature in January of 2002 eliminated Jim's seat due to a population shift, which reduced the number of Ohio's congressional districts from 19 to 18. But never deterred from a challenge, Jim maintained his stance on running for election, but this time, Jim would run as an independent in the newly drawn District 17, which merged Democrat Tom Sawyer's Summit County turf with Jim's Mahoning Valley territory. Meanwhile, the trial against Jim started in February 2002 after Jim failed in his other attempts to delay the trial. And of course, Jim represented himself in court.
I have a feeling that since this is federal, he's not going to be as successful, but we shall see.
So as I said before, Jim tried to paint this picture of corruption in the FBI office. He pointed his finger to lead prosecutor Craig Morford, who had also just so happened to be the lead attorney for the IRS and who led the investigation that found Jim guilty of tax evasion way back when.
Oh.
Isn't that just a funny,
Yeah.
kind of a funny thing?
Well, it's because they're after him, Sarah.
It's a witch hunt, as we
witch
said.
hunt.
Yeah. Reporter John Bresnahan, who I'm sure we're all familiar with.
Hey, John, you've never met me,
Yeah.
but I listen to, or I read your articles all the time.
I read a bit from him who was talking about his late friend and late reporter, Damon Chappie, who attended Jim's 10-week trial in Ohio. And John said from Damon that Jim kept trying to haul in witnesses, making wild and totally unsubstantiated accusations. And some of these witnesses even corroborated with the prosecution's side.
I'm not really surprised. He doesn't seem like someone who's going to vet people properly.
Right? Yeah. He's also not a trained attorney, and so he would call objection, and at times he couldn't, and would say things to the judge like, I don't want the prosecution to ever speak to me ever again.
It sounds like a teenager just like fighting with their parents.
Judge, I don't want the prosecution to ever speak to me ever again.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
So the LA Times also wrote about how Jim at one point yelled at a witness saying that the witness was lying under oath. And following this outburst, he told reporters, I never do anything without a reason. The courtroom is a theater.
I mean, he's not wrong. He's turning it into a theater.
Yeah, he is. The other element to Jim's defense was that there was, quote unquote, no fingerprint evidence or audio tapes that validated the testimony of the prosecution's witnesses, aka like there had been before. And some of the witnesses even admitted.
Wait, I'm sorry. So basically he's saying like, hey, the stuff y'all got me on last time, you don't have it this time.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to do?
Boom.
He's like, last time I committed a crime, they used fingerprints and no fingerprints here.
No tapes.
Yeah.
No tapes.
What are you going to do? I got smarter. What are you going to do? Go back to my last
I learned
trial.
how to commit crimes, okay?
Go back to my last trial. I wear
Step
gloves
off.
now.
Yeah. Jim also highlighted that some of the witnesses had admitted that they had been charged as well in the case and had cut deals with the prosecution for lesser sentences, of course, to testify.
It happens, but
Yeah.
that is a valid thing to bring up.
Yeah, but not, I don't think compelling enough for, the crimes that he has.
It's something that can be compelling in the context of a lot of other compelling evidence.
Yeah. But Jim was hoping that this lack of quote-unquote physical evidence would plant enough doubt in the jury's mind for them not to convict him. So I think that's the whole, as you were saying earlier, the idea is to distract. The idea is at least to sow reasonable doubt. And sometimes, right, that's all you can do. It's not about disproving. It's about causing reasonable doubt.
But the crimes he's convicted or he's being tried for aren't ones where you need physical evidence.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they had like bank transactions and stuff. I'm sure they did have some sort of physical evidence, just not the kind that nothing that like his DNA or him confessing.
Sure. Yeah.
I am worried though, because we know that Jim is popular with voters and a jury box is kind of like a miniature voting booth. So I'm curious to see how this plays out.
Well, let's go to closing arguments. The Akron Beacon Journal reported that prosecutor Craig Morford said that Jim, quote unquote, used his public office as a trough to feed his personal appetites, and that it doesn't matter if he is humorous, he used his position to commit a pattern of offenses.
He's humorous, but it's because people are laughing at him and not with him.
Craig also told the jury to consider the 6 binders of evidence in their deliberations, countering Jim's claim of them not having enough evidence. He's like, look at these 6 binders.
Evidence.
Tell me there's no evidence. In response, Jim pulled out a toilet paper roll from a bag and said, this is about the only thing they have. Jim also said, they have 912 documents and not one of them fingerprint of Jim Traficant was found on any of those documents.
Okay, why is this man obsessed with, like, genitalia and poop and bras? Like, why does it always come to this with him?
Right? The physical stuff.
So he planned this. He brought toilet paper.
Yeah.
And is like, they don't have did they even test for fingerprints? Like, I don't think that's something that they would have done.
Right. What you wouldn't need.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. What are you going to, yeah.
And
no.
I'm thinking, like,
that makes no sense. And this, yeah.
And, like, let's say it's a bank. Maybe they, like, printed out his bank transactions into a sheet of paper that he never even held.
Right. Yeah.
He's acting like he's on trial for murder here.
But he's not. Yeah. That's the thing. In closing also, Jim said he didn't blame the prosecution's witnesses because they were trying to save their own asphalt. And he ended by saying this to the jury. This is your courtroom. Don't let the people tell you how to vote. Make up your own minds as Americans.
Hell yeah. Eagle screech.
Yeah. It took about 2 days for the jury to come to a verdict. Are you ready?
Yes. Should we drum roll?
Yeah. Jim Traficant was guilty of all 10 counts charged against him. And the jury also ordered Jim to forfeit $96,000 in ill-gotten gains.
So what I'm hearing is that the IRS got to the jury box and they were like, hey, we're after this guy.
They got him.
The IRS was able to taint the jury pool.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing too.
Yeah.
Just a wide-scale conspiracy.
Yeah. I mean, how are you going to prove that someone took kickbacks without fingerprints?
Yeah. It's impossible.
Yeah. Wire transfers don't exist.
Impossible.
Yeah. No.
Jim, of course, told the public days later that he planned on appealing the charges, saying, I will not allow the government to get rid of Jim Traficant without a fight.
Third person. Ugh,
I know.
I hate it. I hate it.
He's like, I want my name to be in the quote.
Yeah. Jim Traficant says, Jim Traficant's innocent.
I love it. He's like, he's thinking about that quote. He's thinking about that paper quote. Come on now. Now, you might have forgotten, but I'm here to remind you still that Jim was still a member of Congress when he was convicted in April 11th, 2002.
Well, he had nothing to do because he wasn't on committee.
Right.
So what else are you going to do but go get convicted?
Yeah. But he was still a member of Congress this entire time.
The only hearings he was a part of were his own.
Oh, no.
Oh my god, she was like, I'm so tired of being blocked from these hearings. I'm gonna make my own.
Yeah, I'm doing my own. Come on now.
And I'm gonna be the main character of it.
Oh, Jim. So back in Washington, Democrats were obviously calling for Jim to resign, and Jim's conviction triggered an automatic ethics committee investigation under House rules. While their investigation was conducted, House rules barred Jim from voting unless his conviction was overturned or if he won re-election. By late June, the House Ethics Committee... Sorry, guys, I just said that word 1,000 times, and I messed it up 1,000 times, so that felt unnatural. They issued a 10-count set of violations against Jim based on what was found at trial and set the stage for a public hearing. Based on the findings at the hearing, ethics would recommend a punishment, worst of all being expulsion. While other punishments like censure or reprimand would only require a simple majority, expulsion requires a 2/3 majority.
And for listeners who don't know, the House Ethics Committee is made up of half Republicans and half Democrats. So one party doesn't have control over the House Ethics Committee. It's evenly divided.
Yep. Thank you. Unsurprisingly, the public hearing did not go Jim's way, and the panel found Jim was in violation of all 10 ethics violations. At this hearing, Jim told onlookers that he would wear a denim suit and do a Michael Jackson moonwalk on the House floor if he had to defend himself on the House floor against expulsion.
I would vote to expel him just to see that.
Right. Anyways, the panel recommended for Jim to be expelled from Congress.
Shocking.
And on the evening of July 25th, Jim's expulsion was put forth for a full House vote. Despite his threats to come in wearing a denim suit and to moonwalk, Jim came in much more subdued. After once again arguing that witnesses lied and that the Justice Department was out to get him, Jim ended his floor speech with, "Vote your conscience. Nothing personal." One of Jim's besties in Congress, who I mentioned before, Republican Representative Stephen LaTourette, he asked the House to delay the vote until after recess, which would at least allow for Jim to do some more legal maneuvering since his sentencing was due to happen the following week. That request actually got some good Republican support, but ultimately lost in a 146 to 285 vote, as reported by the New York Times. Other members of the Ethics Committee said the House's task was sad but had to go ahead. "Tonight is the night that we need to do this business," as said Representative Joel Heffley, a low-key Colorado Republican who is chairman of the House Ethics Committee. "This is no rush to judgment." In the end, Jim Traficant was removed from office by a vote of 420 to 1, with 9 lawmakers voting present.
Was LaTourette the one?
Nope. But this is actually pretty funny. The one dissenting vote came from none other than California Congressman Gary Condon.
You're joking.
I am not. Isn't this hilarious?
That's crazy.
So, for the listeners, you may remember from our first episode of Crime in Congress that Gary Condon was involved in his own scandal after he was deemed a person of interest in the disappearance and later found to be murder of DC intern Chandra Levy. And at the time of her disappearance, Chandra was involved with an affair with a congressman.
Birds of a feather.
Yep. So, of course, he voted no, right? He's like, oh, I know about scandal. But it's also worth noting that Jim was only the 5th member of Congress expelled. 3 representatives were voted out in 1861 on charges of treason at the start of the Civil War. And then Michael J. Myers, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, was expelled in 1980 based on his involvement in the ABC scam, which, by the way, is on my list to cover.
If you are expelled from Congress, you're on the list, baby.
Yeah. Now, Harley, you kind of hinted at this, but is Jim Traficant the latest member of Congress to be expelled?
Why, Sarah, no, he is not.
And who might be the latest member of Congress to be expelled?
I think his name is Mr. George Santos.
You are right. We're making history every day, folks.
Every day.
Santos, unlike Jim Traficant, notably pled guilty to committing wire fraud and aggravated identity theft.
I also want to make a note that we have invited Santos on the pod. So, Santos, if you want to come on and defend yourself, the pod's open.
The pod is open for you, and we want to hear your side of things.
We do. Tell us why you're innocent.
Yeah.
I want to hear.
Even though you pled guilty, tell us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to hear from you.
We'll be nicer to you than Z-Way was.
Yeah, I agree with that. So don't let that one experience drag you down. Come on our pod. But less than a week after his expulsion, Jim was back in Ohio for his sentencing, where he was sentenced to 8 years in prison and fined $150,000.
Wait, that's it?
Light sentence.
That was
Light sentence.
barely. I mean, I think his lowest fine was $100,000.
Yeah.
So that's barely 2 fines.
Yeah. Barely 2 fines. And also, I think it was racketeering could have carried 20 years in prison. Not to mention, like, all the other charges. He only got 8.
This is a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, totally. So he was immediately led away in handcuffs to the jail, since the judge would not allow him to remain free on bail while he appealed his convictions. But during that being led away, Jim told reporters that, quite frankly, I expect to be reelected.
Whew, that's a bold prediction.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, right?
No, you're correct. Jim did not win, but he still got 15% of the vote.
I wonder if that 15% is just name recognition. They're
Right,
like,
they're like,
I've heard this name somewhere before.
He has the incumbent, next to his
Yeah.
name, be like, hey, listen, he's been doing good so far. Yeah. However, a former aide to Jim, Democrat Tim Ryan, did win the seat, and he served in Congress from 2003 to 2023. And you may also remember Tim Ryan as a Democrat who ran against J.D. Vance in the 2022 election for Senate.
Yeah, I had no idea that Tim Ryan was his staffer.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Didn't Tim Ryan also run for president?
Oh, yes, he totally did. Yes.
Crazy.
So Jim Traficant would serve 7 years in prison and was released from prison on September 2nd, 2009.
Any remorse?
Not really or at all.
Okay.
In an interview following his release, Jim said, I forfeited my future, and I didn't give a damn about what they did to me. And from this day forward, I don't give a damn what anybody does to me. I'm going to say what I think is right. I'm going to do what I think is right. And if it offends some people, then so be it. You see, because I'm still, I guess, the same jackass I was.
Respect. He acknowledges his jackassery.
He absolutely
he's
does.
Not changing. He's like,
No.
you know what? 7 years in the clink did nothing to me.
Boom.
It only made me stronger.
I'm going to do and say what I think is right.
Mm-hmm. Which, if he were right, would be great.
Yeah.
But he's not. What he thinks is right is wrong.
Commit any crimes. Yeah, it would be cool. But rather than living a quiet life in Ohio, Jim decided to run for his old seat in 2010 as an independent and said that he would repeal the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which, do you know what that does, Harley?
Is that the income tax amendment?
Yep, it is. It is. So, as you may have already guessed it, though, Jim did not win election. But this time, he did receive 16% of the vote. A percentage point higher than he had received while he was in the United States Penitentiary at Allenwood.
It's both impressive and horrifying.
Yeah, totally. So in July of 2014, he revived his political aspirations by founding Project Freedom USA, aimed at pressuring Congress to, quote-unquote, stop the madness by eliminating all income and payroll taxes and repealing the 16th Amendment, among other things, as was reported in the International Business Times.
Sounds like the fair tax, kind of. I bet he's a big fair tax guy.
Well, not anymore. Guys, these efforts would end when Jim was critically injured trying to park his vintage tractor on his family farm in Youngstown. The tractor had flipped over and trapped him underneath.
Oh.
5 days later, Jim died at a hospice in Poland, Ohio, aged 73, on September 27th, 2014. The coroner's office said that Jim's death was most likely linked to positional asphyxiation or his inability to breathe when the tractor flopped over on him.
That'll do it.
Yeah. But in conclusion, I'll want to leave you with one quote from reporter Paul Kane. Traficant was a decades-long crook. He extorted money from his own staff, forcing them to slide envelopes of cash underneath his office door in Youngstown. He took bribes. He shook down donors. And all the while, Youngstown slid deeper and deeper into economic despair.
I think you said it perfectly when you said that his career is the embodiment of Youngstown.
Mm-hmm.
The rise and the fall, the mob boss of it all.
Yeah.
He is, I see why he was elected to represent Youngstown, because
I
he
do too.
is Youngstown.
Yeah. And
That's
why
crazy.
he was there for so long, and even, after everything happened, he's still getting 15-16% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
People just loved him.
The fact that he maintained his innocence.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I think always what that university professor said too about their population being like okay, like we accept this as the political law enforcement institution, like these mobsters, and this is fine for our society to be safe. We need them. So his connection to the mob was just kind of a non-factor in a way to a lot of people there, especially a lot of people who had like grown up around this. So like your older generation too. So anyways, that is the story of Jim Traficant, and I think it is fascinating from top to bottom.
Yeah. I want to see who has the seat now. Michael Ruley. So it's still a Democrat. I think he's a Democrat. No, he's a Republican. So the seat flipped.
Oh.
Interesting. That's just representing Youngstown. I don't know if it's the exact same seat, but crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, that was quite a story you had for me today.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as I was
right.
mesmerized by it, dumbfounded, astounded, befuddled, all the words by this buffoon.
What a buffoon. What a buffoon.
Buffoonery. Before we go, we recorded an episode with Lunch with Shelley.
Yes, we
did. Which is a great DC-based podcast, and you should definitely go listen. lunchwithshelley.com or wherever you get your podcasts. It was super fun. We talked about political scandals. We talked about the Teresita Bassa case, which is my personal favorite true crime story. And we ate some really good food and had some good laughs. So if you want to hear about Harley's experience with 60 human cadavers.
Or Sarah's experience having her car stolen amongst maybe potentially other crimes.
Yeah. Sarah's got some stories. You should listen. We'll link it in the episode notes.
Yes, we absolutely will.
All right, Sarah. Is it time?
I think it's time. Harley, will you gavel us out?
Of course.